It is amazing to be here. Welcome to International Solidarity Now. And this is a gathering for more just Canadian foreign policy. It's great to see you all. It's just incredible to see this turnout, like this many people who care about Canada's foreign policy, and to know that there are 60 groups across the country that are represented here, and that we're all working in some capacity for foreign policy based on peace, on human rights, and care for the planet. So my name is Bianca Mugyenyi, and I direct the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, which aims to bridge the gap between the perception and reality of Canada's policies abroad. So I'm just going to change the view there for a second. So today I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the island of Montreal, or Tiohtià:ke, which is situated on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people, who are and the keepers of the eastern door of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And it's a place that has long been a point of meeting and exchange for many First Nations. So as a point of just a bit of housekeeping, it's a virtual gathering, and that is, it's almost an oxymoron, but let's try it out. The speaker info is going to be posted by Canadian Foreign Policy Institute fellow Tamara Lawrence in the chat, so look out for all of those links. Please, let's connect with each other. I want you to encourage each other to ask questions. Let us know about your work and your interests. Let us know where you're coming from. The chat's open. As always, please keep your comments civil, refraining from any sexist, racist, or otherwise harmful commentary. Obvious stuff. We are live streaming to Facebook. Tamara Lawrence, who's helping with all the chat things, has just posted the link. So it's Canadian Foreign Policy's Facebook page. Please share this with your communities if you can. We're going to try to integrate some social media aspects into the evening's proceedings, and we'll be simultaneously posting videos that many of you sent in. So these are being posted on our Twitter page, which is @foreignpolicy, and I think Tamara has just shared the link to our Twitter there as well, or will do so. So why are we here? Today marks 1 year since Canada was defeated in its bid for a seat on the UN Security Council. The Trudeau government's loss marked a rejection of its pro-Washington, militaristic, anti-Palestinian policies. And in the months preceding the vote, there were about a half dozen activists, all on this call, who launched the #NoUNSC4Canada campaign that sought to use this media moment to really criticize Canada's climate, nuclear, and mining policies, as well as its destructive role across the global south in countries like Bolivia, in Haiti, in Venezuela, and in Palestine. And the CFPI was born out of that campaign. So after the Security Council defeat, wise activist Nino Pagliccia wrote, "The international community has not given a vote of confidence to Canada's foreign policy by denying it a seat on the UNSC. That's all the international community can do. It is now up to Canadians to demand changes to our government." Canada's second consecutive Security Council loss rattled a lot of people, but it also opened up some space for a critical discussion of Canada's foreign policy. And really, there hasn't been much. And since then, there's been a real, if slight, shift in the foreign policy discourse in this country. We saw substantial criticism of Canada's role in the coup against Evo Morales after his party won Bolivia's elections in the fall. We saw a huge increase in campaigning for Canada to sign onto the UN nuclear ban treaty. There was meaningful support across the country for criticism of Canada's role in backing a repressive, corrupt Haitian president. And in recent weeks, we've seen tens of thousands of people living in Canada take to the streets in opposition to Israeli violence against Palestinians. So one of these, I would say one of this year's foreign policy beacons was witnessing the NDP activists. A lot of young activists passed a pro-Palestinian resolution at their recent NDP policy convention. And we have allies. We have allies in the House of Commons, like Paul Manley, like Matt Green, like Leah Gazin. Oh, we just need to make sure that we're on mute. Thank you. Thank you. As I was saying, we have allies in the House of Commons like Matthew Green, Leah Gaza, Nikki Ashton, Paul Manny, and if we want a foreign policy that's based on peace, that's based on human rights and care for the planet, the only way forward is to organize. So the CFPI is really seeking to be a hub of critical foreign policy discussion. And part of our mandate is to amplify voices and organizations that are challenging Canada's unjust policies abroad, because we know that we're stronger together. So we need to connect, we need to amplify our collective efforts. And tonight we're really hoping to introduce you to some groups, some of which you may not have known existed, who share many of these priorities. So we're going to be sharing things like contact information, ideas, and much more. Knowing about each other, and there's many groups that we're simply not aware of or that should have been invited, but knowing about each other is the first step towards supporting each other. And we know that there are thousands, even hundreds of thousands of Canadians that are concerned about Canada's role on the world stage and who want to get plugged in with groups who are organizing around these issues. So I'm looking so forward to this evening, to hearing all about your work. We have tremendous organizers in the House. And tonight we have the distinct pleasure of hearing from Avi Lewis, L. Jones, and John Clarke, as well as many groups across the country. So let's get to it. It's my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the evening, Avi Lewis, who I was personally fortunate enough to have worked with for many years at the LEAP. Avi is one of my favorite orators. He's an award-winning filmmaker, co-founder of the LEAP, and currently running for Parliament in the West Vancouver Sunshine. Coast, sea to sky, country riding. It's a mouthful. Welcome, Avi. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Bianca. It is such a delight to be here with you all this evening. I am coming to you from Huelquai, otherwise known as Half Moon Bay, on the ancestral lands of the Shuswap Nation outside of Sechelt, British Columbia, where I live. And it's very moving to see the extraordinary assembly of decades of powerful struggle and truth-telling and activism and organizing assembled here. The foreign policy space is absent in our national discussion most of the time. And yet there is incredible wisdom and skill and power on the foreign policy left in Canada. And this, Bianca and the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, huge thanks and gratitude and humility for bringing together this extraordinary gathering. Let it be the first of many, and let's connect and organize together. There is so much work to do. As the first speaker, I think I'll just make some very high-level comments about this political moment that we find ourselves in, hoping that it will help all of the specifics of the gathering fall into a bigger frame. And of course, in the great tradition of critical discourse, if I get anything wrong, please excoriate me, reframe, don't accept what I'm saying if I miss something. But I do feel that this is incredible timing, that we need a movement shouting international solidarity now, like never before. It is, without exaggeration, a matter of survival. And I'm so grateful to be in this space where we can talk about all of the work that's going on the left around foreign policy. We're in a unique historic moment. We're in a moment of unprecedented overlapping crises. And the opportunity represented by tonight is that all of those crises that we're facing right now pull us out of our parochialism and into the world of the world, the whole world. So let me just start with a brief exercise in naming, for me, the big three: climate, COVID, and colonialism. The pandemic has been a terrifyingly good teacher on so many fronts. As much suffering and misery and death and grief and anxiety as we are surrounded with in this moment, the pandemic has unveiled so much about our world. We live in a country which has hoarded vaccines, which bought 5 times as many vaccines as we had population, and which goes to the G7 and participates in an exercise that thumbs its nose at solidarity by proposing a meager, at most 10% of the vaccine that is necessary, that needs to be paid for by the rich countries of the world. We are practicing vaccine apartheid, and the answer is vaccine internationalism, is vaccine solidarity. And that is a matter of life and death for people around the world. But it's also a matter of life and death here because the virus teaches us that none of us is safe until all of us are safe. And those words are the fundamental statement of international solidarity. They are exactly what the climate emergency teaches us. And we've seen incredible movement on climate in the last few years as the emergency starts to sink into the skin of people, not just those on the front lines who have been warning us of this for decades, but everyone now is starting to feel the reality of the climate emergency. And there's been exciting climate justice organizing happening in recent years. I've been part of it in advancing the frame of the Green New Deal and proposing really for the first time in integrated ways, solutions at the speed and scale required to meet the measure of this historic moment. And to begin to grapple with the reality of colonial supply chains and how raw resources are continually extracted even in the climate response that we talk about. So people like me like to talk about hundreds of thousands of jobs in housing and transit. And if we do it all on the basis we've already done it, we will unleash an extraction whirlwind that will chew up the bodies of human beings in communities at the sites of extraction, of lithium, of rare earth minerals, of construction materials all over the world, here on Turtle Island and in the global south. So we know we can't have a Green New Deal in the name of climate justice unless it actually encompasses the reality of the whole world. And a global Green New Deal movement is being born and linking up and starting to connect those dots. And speaking of colonial supply chains, we have a unique historical moment here in the country called Canada to advance the understanding that this is an ongoing project, that it's in no way a historical relic, but it is the daily reality, lived reality of so many people on these lands. The conversation around the 215 unearthed in Tecumseh in the final House of Commons speech of Muammar these moments of the vicious Islamophobic murder has created a moment that feels at once to me sickeningly familiar, but also we are seeing some cracks in the colonial edifice that feel new. When statues started toppling in the racial justice uprisings just almost exactly a year ago, we were treated to endless hand-wringing by the very serious makers of very serious opinions in the corporate news mills. When Ryerson was toppled just 10 days ago and his head showed up on a pike at 1492 Landback Lane, no less, the National Post barely managed a carefully calibrated column or two, more than a week later. Things are changing. In the last horrific attack on Gaza, it felt like the conversation about Palestine in Canada started finally to shift. And as we confront the daily ugly hatred of mainstream and widespread Islamophobia and are naming that more forthrightly this week, last week, is it finally beginning to be a subject that runs through our national conversation, that pulls us out of these parochial bubbles that we're in into the rest of the world. All of these victories may be more in the realm of rhetoric than action, but they all pull us out of this domestic claustrophobia and out into the world, where Canada is still a destructive colonial player, where Canada is still a climate criminal and a vaccine hoarder, and where surging social movements across the globe are building power and are out there waiting for us to catch up. So this work that we're going to hear about tonight in all of its extraordinary diversity in this great constellation of work that is appearing in the sky of this evening, this work has never been more important. I am deeply grateful to every single one of the organizations and comrades on this call for the decades of effort and struggle that have led us to this moment of ultimate consequence. So let us make the most of it and say international solidarity now and forever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Avi, for that rousing call to action and for reminding us that these overlapping crises are real and that this is a historical moment. Things are changing. What hopeful words. It's an honor to have you with us this evening. Thank you. So I want to welcome some of the organizations that are here with us today, but not necessarily panelists. I want to give a big welcome to Labor Against the Arms Trade and WILP Canada, to the Regina Peace Council, to Samidoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network. I want to give a shout out to Climate Justice Montreal, as well as Pax Christi Toronto. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please find out about their work. Tamara's posting information about them. And I'll be doing some more shout outs a little bit later on. So now we get to hear about some of the work that you are doing, and we're going to have some rapid fire presentations. Those are up ahead. And we're going to start with Jamie Kneen from MiningWatch. Welcome, Jamie.
Unmute, Jamie. We can't hear you. Start again.
Way to waste my first 20 seconds, right? Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Avi. That's a tough act to follow. I'm Jamie Kneen, one of the co-founders of MiningWatch Canada. MiningWatch was created to bring forward the voices of communities and Indigenous peoples affected by mining to address their situations, but also to change the rules that privilege and perpetuate destructive and exploitative forms of development. Canadian foreign policy is a key part of those rules. Canada enthusiastically undertakes what we euphemistically call economic diplomacy. Directly, as well as through multilateral institutions like the World Bank, the Canadian government works to force other countries to rewrite their mining, environmental, and labor laws to favor foreign investment, and specifically Canadian investment. It ensures that Canadian investments are well protected through free trade and investment agreements and tax treaties. The pretense is that this investment benefits Canadians as well as so-called host countries, providing jobs and generating wealth. In reality, that wealth almost entirely benefits investors and elites, helping maintain and expand the pillage of vulnerable countries where trillions, yes, trillions of dollars in wealth are extracted globally, and a small percentage is retained as taxes and royalties or returned as aid and investment. Meanwhile, the damage mining does to communities and ecosystems undermines the prospects for more sustainable development. But the Canadian government also intervenes in support of individual mining companies, providing financial support through Export Development Canada, but also lobbying for them and even helping them apply for permits. We work with affected communities and civil society groups to expose these activities and their real-life effects, and to press for these discredited policies to be abandoned. Going further towards a foreign policy based on solidarity and mutual aid means working to actively dismantle the relationships of dependency and exploitation, and instead pay reparations and make real contributions to the well-being and security of all peoples. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jamie. MiningWatch's work is critical, and we should all be supporting the work that you're doing. Next, we're going to hear from Rachel at World Beyond War Canada. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Rachel Small. I'm the Canada organizer with World Beyond War. We're a global grassroots network advocating really for the complete abolition of war and the institution of war and its replacement with a just and sustainable peace. We have members in, I think, 192 countries now worldwide, all working to debunk the myths of war and really advocating for, and what's more, taking concrete steps to build an alternative global security system, one that's based on demilitarizing security, managing conflict non-violently, and really creating a culture of peace. Here in so-called Canada, we're working really hard to counter this country's ongoing, and in some cases, increasing role as a colonizer, as a warmonger, as a global arms dealer, as a weapons manufacturer, us as organizers, activists, volunteers, staff, or the members of our incredible World Beyond War chapters. We're all working basically to end the violence of Canadian militarism in solidarity with those most impacted by it. So what does that mean? It means we're pushing really hard to cancel Canada's arms trade with Saudi Arabia, fueling the war in Yemen, wherever we can. We're getting our bodies directly in front of these LAVs, these tanks that are headed to Saudi Arabia, and the trains and trucks that carry them. It means we stand in solidarity with everyone on the front end of the weapons that Canada is dealing as Canada becomes one of the world's top arms dealer and currently the second biggest weapons supplier to the whole Middle East. We're campaigning as part of the No Fighter Jets Coalition to cancel Canada's planned purchase of 88 new warplanes, which we know will be used as the last ones were to rain bombs in US and NATO-led wars. We're also organizing to stop Canada's planned purchase of its first ever armed drones, a planned purchase that very few people are even talking about yet. Our commitment to end war and the war machine and militarism, of course, includes standing with the Indigenous people across Turtle Island who are increasingly recruited by the military and RCMP, even as it's, of course, militarized violence that's continuing colonization across so-called Canada. And we know it's those folks taking a stand at the climate front lines, especially Indigenous peoples, who are currently being attacked and surveilled by the Canadian military, not to mention the ways that militarized police forces are enacting violence from coast to coast. So our war abolition work goes hand in hand with police abolition movements and other abolition movements as well. Essentially, we work in solidarity with and alongside those around the world who've been attacked, bombed, sanctioned because of Canada and Canadian militarism, those surrounding military bases, the test sites, the low-fly jet zones, the mines where the devastating extraction of materials for war machines is happening. And really, we're deeply committed to movement building and to coalition work. That's why we're a founding member of the brand new Canada-wide Peace and Justice Network. That's why really we're thrilled to be here alongside all of you tonight. And we really look forward to working together onwards in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. The work of World Beyond War is tremendous, and we really are so grateful for your activism and also for your role in revitalizing the anti-war movement. Next up, we have Hammam Farah, who is representing Palestine House. Welcome, Hammam.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me, Bianca. I'm Hammam. I'm a longtime Palestine Solidarity organizer and Palestinian in the Greater Toronto area. And I'm a board member of the Palestinian Canadian Community Center. Some of you may know it as Palestine House. Actually, as I'm speaking right now, the Israeli military is bombing Gaza yet again. And we're joining in the calls that are coming out for protests and mobilizations this weekend all over again. Usually we advocate for the rights of the Palestinian people back home. We also are starting to take on a project where we're advocating for the rights of the Palestinian community members locally right here in the Greater Toronto area, particularly in Mississauga, where the Palestinian community is mostly concentrated in. We're starting a project of organizing working class Palestinian people in order to join in these efforts that we've all been working on for so long in solidarity with Palestine. Of course, we fully support and back and advocate for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. We encourage everyone, all of you, all those who stand in solidarity with us, to pressure their respective institutions to endorse the boycott, divestment, sanctions, or BDS campaigns. We face a lot of backlash. It's part of the fight to face the backlash of the Israel lobby and the Canadian government's response to advocating for Palestine. And the recent crisis, as all of you know about. So many people now know about this issue due to the work that we've been doing. But right now, the families that are being ethnically cleansed in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of occupied East Jerusalem, and soon the houses in Silwan village are under threat and are set to be demolished soon. Actually, they've given notices to the residents to demolish their own homes before the state demolishes it itself and then bills the residents for that demolishing, which is a common practice by the Israeli authorities in occupied East Jerusalem in order to bring in illegal Israeli settlers into the area. So that's why we've called for mobilizations. Gaza, of course, is being bombed. It was bombed the other week, as all of you know. We need to pressure the Canadian state to put sanctions on Israel. It's now the time for sanctions, the time for education and raising awareness. That's great, but we need to now move beyond the raising awareness strategy and move into more direct actions, a direct action strategy, as well as increasing our lobbying efforts, like the good work that Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East and Independent Jewish Voices have been doing for years and getting much better at. Great to see. We in Palestine House have also been involved directly in the effort that Bianca mentioned of the NDP to pass that resolution calling on a weapons embargo against Israel and for Canada to stop doing trade with the illegal Israeli settlements and to boycott Israeli settlement products. That was one of our biggest achievements. And the NDP just called for that. Jagmeet Singh called for a weapons embargo as soon as when Gaza was bombed in the latest crisis. But we need to, of course, do more than that. And I just have to say that the world's reaction this time to the bombardment of Gaza is so much greater than it ever has been, as long as I remember it. And that's due to the testament. That's a testament to the work that we've been doing around Palestine solidarity. We're managing to finally break the fear barrier around being labeled anti-Semitic. The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, is being rejected in many governing bodies, which is great to see. But of course, there is so much more work to be done. And I can't wait to hear from many of you. Please feel free to reach out to us. Find us on social media. Let's do some real work. Let's pressure the Canadian state. Let's raise the costs of the Canadian state support for Israeli apartheid, because as we know from history, that's the only way that apartheid is going to fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Hammam. Thank you so much for just bringing our attention to this critical struggle for Palestinian liberation, and also for your impact. We've all seen it this year, and for bearing with the backlash. So due to time constraints, not all groups present today are going to be presenting live, but many of you have sent in videos, and I just want to take a moment to let people know to visit our Twitter, where you can hear from many more of the participants that are present with us this evening. So yes, it's social media time. Go to our Twitter when you have a moment. We're actually tweeting out simultaneously as this gathering is happening. Check them out. People took time to make them, and let's share the words of our colleagues. So I want to thank International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War Canada, who sent in their words, Coalition for Responsible Energy Development in New Brunswick, Minds Action, Niagara Movement for Justice in Palestine, Israel, Just Peace Advocates, Peace Magazine, Canadian Friends Service Committee, Quakers, Nova Scotia Voice of Women, who've all really shone a light very briefly on how they're working to advance a more just foreign policy. So their Twitter bites are online, short on length, big on inspiration, big on action. And we'll be mentioning more videos a little bit later. So next, we're going to hear from Kelsey Gallagher at Project Plowshares. And just want to remind speakers to try and take no more than 2 minutes, just so that we can get through and listen to all of your brilliant presentations. So welcome, Kelsey.
Thanks, Bianca. I'll keep it quick. But thanks, Bianca, for having us, and to CFPI for hosting this event tonight. So I'm Kelsey Gallagher with Project Plowshares. And Plowshares is one of Canada's oldest peace research organizations. And this year we're actually celebrating our 45th anniversary. And again, so happy to be here. So Plowshares spearheads advocacy efforts on issues of peace, disarmament, and arms control through a policy lens. We're also proud members of a series of international civil society coalitions contributing to arms control and peace building. We call on the Canadian government to engage in just multilateralism to ensure a more peaceful world and the protection of civilians in conflict. Since our inception, Plowshares has advocated for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. While in the past, Canada has endorsed that all other categories of weapons of mass destruction be specifically prohibited, nuclear weapons, the most destructive of all, remarkably remain off of this list. We call on the government of Canada to unreservedly endorse and sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and call on other states to follow suit. For nearly 2 decades, Plowshares has called for outer space to remain a peaceful domain, while identifying its creeping threat of weaponization. We support the generation of a multilateral space security treaty or policy instrument as the basis of an effective regime for space activities. Plowshares has systematically tracked the Canadian arms trade since the 1970s. Whereas Canada acceded to the Arms Trade Treaty in 2019, the current government has exported more weapons to states accused of war crimes than any other Canadian government on public record. We continue to call for a cessation of arms exports to Saudi Arabia alongside other serial human rights abusers. Emerging military and security technologies are bringing forth new challenges to peace and civilian protection, in particular, the weaponization of autonomous systems. Plowshares is a proud member of the campaign to stop killer robots, supporting efforts for a ban on lethal autonomous weapon systems. Plowshares recognizes that a strong sense of international solidarity is necessary to achieve a more peaceful and prosperous environment for all people, especially those in the global south and those experiencing conflict abroad. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you. That was succinct. Huge appreciation for the systemic long-term work of Project Plowshares. You've been a huge resource, especially being able to do this work for so long. Everybody find out about them, links in the chat. Next up, we have Pablo Vivanco, who's representing the Canadian Latin America Alliance. Pablo.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks, Bianca. Happy to be here and support the work of CFPI, and honored to participate with all of these organizations working on so many different issues, which in and of itself kind of shows how dismal Canada's current role in the world is. I'm representing, as Bianca said, the Canadian Latin American Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization of Latin Americans in Canada that pursues the development of a relationship between Canada and Latin America based on principles of democracy, self-determination, and defense of human rights. So at this moment, what that means is working to push back against Canada's detrimental role in Latin America when it comes to sovereignty and social justice. That we started working, noticing, or rather after what has already been talked about in terms of Canada's role in buttressing the coup in Bolivia. But by that time, obviously, Canada had already been playing a leading role in trying to destabilize and overthrow the government in Venezuela through its leadership in the Lima Group. But we can talk about many other examples. The very seldom talked about sanctions placed on Nicaragua, which will probably be accelerated in the next coming weeks and months. But also their support for repressive governments in Haiti, recently in Colombia, or as I can testify myself to in Chile, when I was there just as the demonstrations in 2019 were starting. I was put into contact with someone in Chrystia Friedland's office who called me while I was in a demonstration. And I was sending them videos in real time saying, this is what's happening. The person who was very nice and polite subsequently told me that Chrystia Friedland was right there and he couldn't speak anymore, and he basically hung up on me right afterwards. So this is just the state of Canada's postures and positions all over the world, but we've been working with CFPI and others around trying to raise awareness among the public and local media on Canada's role and positions in Latin America, some of the ones that I've already mentioned, as well as to approach legislators so that they can raise these issues in Parliament, and that we can also show that Latin Americans, people of Latin American descent in this country expect our government in Ottawa to not be a detrimental actor in the region and not do what it's been doing for far too long now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pablo. It's been great working with you. CLAA are a new group in Canada and very, very necessary. It's now my pleasure to introduce Elle Jones. Elle is a poet, an author, a journalist, a professor, an activist living in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Elle was Halifax's Poet Laureate from 2013 to 2015. Welcome, Elle.
Thank you, everybody. This poem is a remix of Rage Against the Machine's Know Your Enemy. So this is my Canadian version. Now something must be done about vengeance, a badge and a gun. Something must be done for my brothers in a room without a view, locked away from the sun. See their humanity and set them free, know your real enemy. It is not the man with the Black identity. It is the CBC reporting uncritically about how we hold the record for the longest kill shot. It is surplus weapons used against civilians and then sold to our cops. Our university taking weapons contracts to kill more people by robots. Weaponized pesticides first used in war, now poisoning our crops. Nuclear submarines cruising into our harbor and they're treated like yachts. The cannon firing at noon off Citadel Hill that's thought of as just a prop, while it overlooks the shipyards building warships that Harper's money bought. The same Irving that sends police against Mi'kmaq just protecting their spot. These war criminals who are welcomed in to sit around and plot, know your enemy. It was not just Harper and his team. It is Trudeau looking so friendly as he sits in a teepee, then signs contracts for pipelines to run through sovereign territory. It is war exercises in the harbor that they conduct in secrecy. The billions in increased funding to the military while reserves are left in poverty. So-called security panels hosted at our universities. The weapons we sell to Saudi Arabia purposely and then have the arms dealer funding the Griffin Poetry Prize. The constant propaganda that repeats the military's lies. Millions of refugees created, but it's Muslims who terrorize. And then when there's a mosque shooting, we have the nerve to act surprised. The cameras and surveillance in our neighborhoods and the government spies. The laws that make criticizing Israel a crime, know your enemy. It is this so-called democracy. It is the violence done to Black bodies that is endless. It is the police murdering our people and beating them senseless for the crime of poverty and drug possession. It is former Toronto Police Chief Fantino opening a weed dispensary after decades of prosecuting the war on drugs. All those police investigations that cover up for terrorists and thugs. It is all those good Canadians who think Omar Carter deserved to be tortured. Families of women killed by a retired soldier with PTSD from following orders. The same military leader sitting at the front of his funeral responsible for the slaughters, while the next day there's hardly anyone at the funeral of his wife, mother, and daughter. And all the people held in immigration detention whose deaths never get reported. Arresting grandmothers simply for protecting the waters, and all these racists in denial in Halifax who are Cornwallis statue supporters. A government that allows these war criminals in, that keeps Chelsea Manning from our borders, know your enemy. Because something should be done about federal MPs who steal your taxes to pad their expenses while they build prisons and border fences. It is right-wing think tanks and the Fraser Institute. Don't forget the Lima Group. It is prayer breakfast on Parliament Hill for Israeli settlements and Palestinian repression. It is not the Black man with a gun. The real weapon is the NATO generals who are arming both sides of African insurrections to create dissent so Canadian corporations can profit off the scent of blood. These scabs who legislate essential workers and steal their right to strike are the real menace, the 1% in their plenty. They are the ones who should be prevented. The water board jacking rates up by 20%, the price at the pumps going up overnight by 5 cents, the real gangs of these oil and energy barons, these real murderers of the natural gas industry, the real addicts are addicted to oil and electricity. It is not the ghettos, it is the tar sands. This genocide on Indigenous lands, the real pimps of these bankers, not North Preston's finest. Open your eyes, resist the blindness, know your enemy. It is the RCMP officer who tased Robert Zykanski to death, carrying the flag in the Olympic opening ceremony. It is the RCMP in New Brunswick who raided tents on Mi'kmaq territory to protect the fracking rights of SWN, forbid the warriors in prison to pray, and ban the scent of medicine. Prisons are the new smallpox blankets infiltrating our communities, minimum sentence by minimum sentence. The Canadian public that just accepts the polite consensus, the so-called free speech of right-wingers, which needs to be protected while Muslim families are attacked and left defenseless. Something should be done about what happens to our taxpayer funds, about how we're told we have 3 parties but really have one, the capitalist war party with no opposition. It is how they call for war in Venezuela with no shame of conditions. It is this so-called peacekeeping force and their colonial interventions, the coup in Haiti that Canada forgets to mention, apartheid policies that we invented. You know, peacekeepers raped young boys in Somali detention. When it's convenient, we forget those Geneva Conventions, the mining companies in Latin America with their militias of aggression. Know your enemy. The real crooks are the police chief and his deputies, whose officers admit in court to police brutality, but there is no penalty. There is no penalty. Africville is still bleeding, and there is no memory. Contaminants are still seeping into the groundwater streams in Mi'kma'ki, and there is no remedy. People are still living with the legacy of residential schools and only fake apologies, and the enemy is military ideology, and the enemy is white supremacy, and it's spreading across Canada mentally from Parliament Hill to the penitentiary, black bodies swinging from figurative trees and piles of dead bodies all across the Middle East, and Ashley Smith screams, and this is the Canadian dream. This is the Canadian dream. This is the Canadian dream. We are living the Canadian dream. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Elle. Thank you for those fierce, beautiful words. Know your enemy. Every syllable resonates. You're a force of nature, and we're so lucky to have you in our movement. So I want to take pause and take a moment to also mention that we have some media represented at the gathering. The Breach, Spring Magazine, Canada Files, the New Brunswick Media Co-op, Harbinger Media, and we really need courageous journalism if we're going to change course. And so we appreciate you being here. So we're now going to hear from a few more organizations. I'm going to call on Michael Bueckert from Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, CJPME. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Bianca. It's really an honor to be here in solidarity with you all tonight. My name is Michael Bueckert. I'm with Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, or CJPME. CJPME is a national grassroots organization whose mission is to empower Canadians of all backgrounds to promote justice, development, and peace in the Middle East and here at home in Canada. We produce a lot of different resources to help Canadians and policymakers alike understand the core issues and to advocate for a more just foreign policy. As an example, we just published a new fact sheet on Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan, which Hammam had mentioned earlier, two neighborhoods in occupied East Jerusalem where 175 Palestinian families are facing the threat of mass evictions to be replaced with Israeli settlers in a process of ethnic cleansing. During federal elections, we also published election guides evaluating the main political parties and where they stand on the core issues. And unfortunately, it looks like we may be doing another one of those in the next few months, so stay tuned. We campaign to put pressure on politicians to take better positions on the Middle East with a particular focus on supporting Palestinian human rights and taking action against Israeli apartheid. CJPME is a longtime supporter of the BDS movement, the Palestinian-led call for boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against Israel until it complies with international law. And let me just briefly mention a few of the ongoing initiatives that you may be interested in hearing about. We've been calling on the Canadian government to cancel its $36 million contract with Elbit Systems, Israel's largest military company, weapons manufacturer, which puts money directly into the Israeli infrastructure of occupation and war. We're also giving out these free boycott Pillsbury sticky notes, which you can apply to Pillsbury products in your own local grocery store. This is an action in support of a boycott of Pillsbury, which has a factory in the illegal Israeli settlement of Adaro in East Jerusalem. And so we're calling for a boycott until it closes this factory and complies with international law. Last fall, we also launched a new resource called the UN Dashboard, where you can see how Canada has voted on Palestine-related motions at the United Nations, looking at trends over the past 20 years. So there you can see, unfortunately, Canada's anti-Palestine voting record under Harper has almost entirely been maintained under Trudeau. So those are just a couple of things very quickly. For more about what we do and how to get plugged into our work, please check out cjpme.org. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all of those. So thanks again so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks to CJPME. I don't think a day goes by without me checking your Twitter feed. You're a real beacon of solidarity, and we appreciate you. Next up, we're going to hear from Jennie-Laure Sully from Solidarité Québec Haïti. Welcome, Jenny.
Okay, can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bianca, for inviting me. Yes, I'm Jennie-Laure Sully. I'm a member of Solidarité Québec Haïti. Our group was formed to speak out and condemn the role that Canada is playing in Haiti. This is a role that is increasingly neocolonial. And that role really that Canada is playing in Haiti really took a turn on January 31st, 2003. That was when the government of Canada decided to invite representatives from France, the United States, the OAS, to come to Meech Lake and discuss the future of Haiti without the presence of any Haitian representative. And from that moment, what was discussed really was basically if it was okay to strip a country from its sovereignty. And obviously what seems to have been the decision at that moment that the decision was that it was okay. And so since that meeting, which has been named the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti, there has been information, access to information request, and the government of Canada has refused to reveal exactly what has been discussed in detail during the two-day conference that was held in 2003. Since then, what we know is that the democratically elected president of Haiti was overthrown in 2004. And after that, what happened is that Canada got increasingly involved in financing prisons, financing the repressive police in Haiti, and in financing fraudulent elections. Basically, Canada is part of what is now known in Haiti as the core group. This is sort of it's actually a neocolonial force that makes decisions about the future of Haiti instead of the Haitians right now as we speak. The core group has decided to support the government of Jovenel Moïse that is very much contested, and there's been a lot of protests against him. There's really a massive mobilization in Haiti against the corruption that has been going on in Haiti at least since 2004 and much more after the earthquake in 2011 when Martelly and the PHTK political party came to power with the support of the US and Canada. And right now, what the core group is saying is that Jovenel Moïse, which is also the PHTK party, should be able to organize the next elections in Haiti. They wanted also to organize a referendum to change the constitution, something all sectors in Haiti are against. So we've seen the coming together of peasants, students, of people from the media, from the universities. There's really a large consensus against the changes that Moïse is trying to make and against going to elections with Moïse still in power. The view in Haiti is that since February of this year, the Moïse mandate was actually finished, but he's trying to hold on. So what Canada is doing right now is supporting a dictatorship in Haiti. So our group, Solidarité Québec Haïti, we've launched petitions to ask for the government to reveal what was discussed during the Ottawa Initiative on Haiti. We've done a series of actions since 2019 to ask politicians to stop supporting the repressive regime. We've asked politicians to get out of the core group. Canada should get out of the core group. Canada should stop funding the elections that are always marred in fraud in Haiti. And we've asked also that corporate companies be held accountable. Mining companies right now are basically getting ready to loot the resources of Haiti. SNC-Lavalin has been involved in financial scandals in Haiti. And we have companies such as Gildan that really are only setting up sweatshops in Haiti and busting unions and preventing people from, workers from getting better work conditions in Haiti. So we need Canada to get out of the core group. We invite all Canadians to really condemn the neo-colonial and racist role Canada is playing right now in Haiti.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you for your powerful work and for just letting us know what's happening and for bringing so much attention to Canada's role in Haiti. Really, what opened my eyes, quite frankly, to Canada's foreign policy. There's some relevant petitions in the chat. Also, Hélène Bruyère's groundbreaking film, Haiti Betrayed, is a great resource, among many others. Next up, we have Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, Val, and Vanessa Lanteigne is going to be representing them. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thanks, Bianca. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you all. My name is Vanessa Lanteigne, and I'm the National Coordinator at the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, also known as VOW. And next month, VOW is turning 61 years young and still going strong. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit, membership-based organization that has undertaken many initiatives, moving from an initial emphasis on nuclear disarmament and then to the abolition of war and the promotion of nonviolent means of conflict resolution and social justice in a sustainable world. We are an accredited NGO to the United Nations, affiliated to the Department of Public Information and the Economic and Social Council. VOW was the lead Canadian group for peace at the 1995 Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. And every year we take a delegation to attend the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. And we're actually part of the international lobby, which succeeded in the adoption of the landmark Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. So today, VOW continues to be a strong, critical, feminist voice advocating for a culture of peace and the reduction of military spending on expensive, environmentally destructive, inhumane warfare that weapons companies and NATO insist we need, because we know that nonviolent solutions are the answer to lasting peace and that people, and especially women, do not need Canadian bombs raining down on them during a conflict. They need humanitarian support and protection of their human rights. So we conduct our work through three main pillars. The first is education and raising public awareness on these issues, such as at our annual Peace Camp, webinars, and public protests. The second pillar is political advocacy, like the parliamentary petition against the 88 fighter jets and submissions to the government on foreign policy recommendations. And the third is collaboration with organizations like CFPI and many others I see today to advocate for peace. So you can check us out on our website at www.vowpeace.org, follow us on social media at VowPeace, and subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Thank you everyone for the amazing work that's being done. And thank you especially Bianca for organizing this.
Thank you, Vanessa. VOW is a historic organization that has been organizing relentlessly for peace. So we appreciate your work. Tomorrow's put links in the chat, a great organization to partner with. Up next, we have Rowan Gaudet, who is representing Independent Jewish Voices. Welcome, Rowan.
Thank you so much, Bianca, and thank you to everyone who helped organize and participated in this incredible event and show of solidarity. Independent Jewish Voices Canada, or IJV, is a grassroots Jewish organization here in Canada who focuses primarily on Palestine solidarity, although we work on all kinds of forms of justice. And we're actually the first national Jewish organization in any country, as far as we're aware, to endorse the Palestinian-led call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And much of our work focuses around these three pillars, which have already been discussed here today. But another key part of our work is in resisting the IHRA definition, which Hammam mentioned earlier, particularly with our No IHRA campaign. The IHRA definition falsely equates supporting Palestinian human rights, and criticizing Israel with anti-Semitism, a framework that we totally reject. And we've worked to lead this campaign as Jewish voices who are absolutely opposed to this definition, both here in Canada and with other partners across the world. And so really one of the main things that we're working on is also changing the framework within our Jewish communities and changing the discussions and challenging the frameworks that are common, and also highlighting that the Jewish organizations who claim to speak for the entire community when they advocate blindly for Israel do not actually do so, and that is not what Canadian Jews stand for. And I'll leave it there, but thank you again to everyone, and it's been a pleasure hearing from you all.
Thank you, Rowan. Thanks for your work and the powerful role that IJV is playing in Canada. You're getting lots of love and appreciation in the chat as well, and look forward to working with you more. So up next, we have our next speaker of the evening, John Clarke. John Clarke is a longtime anti-poverty activist. He lives in Toronto. In 2019, John took on the post of the PACA Visitor in Social Justice at the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies at York University. Can't wait to hear from you. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much, Bianca, and thank you everyone for this wonderful meeting. I think I need to begin by just echoing the basic sentiment that this is a time in history when the need for international solidarity has probably never been greater. And I don't mean by that just simply some words to add at the end of what we say. I mean that we really need to build a sense of practical, concrete cooperation and joint struggle against this globe, throughout this globe. I must acknowledge that I've had my doubts about global capitalism for some time, but seeing now what has happened during the pandemic is to see the true irrational, destructive greed of this system working. And it's been absolutely breathtaking to witness a situation where, for the sake of big pharma's patent protection, they will let people die across the world in poor countries rather than provide a vaccine to people. And that is only one manifestation of a crisis that is brewing and increasing internationally. The pandemic is but one expression of a broader ecological crisis, the ramifications of which we are already feeling, but that are going to intensify. And the need for solidarity across borders internationally in the face of such an unprecedented and catastrophic situation is going to be enormous. And in terms of responses, there is a response. There's a response that's coming from on high. And I could call it the Biden restoration. We see the Joe Biden administration beginning to give a lead. On the domestic front, there's talk of progressive directions and stimulation spending, but we can have no illusions that globally it's an agenda of, in fact, intensified global domination and rivalry. And that's what's being pursued, and being pursued absolutely relentlessly. It's gathering steam. We see Biden going from the G7 meeting to the NATO meeting, and that's exactly the line that's being pushed. A very, very brutal agenda, one that's going to hurt in enormous numbers of people. There are major global rivals that they have in mind, of course, but it's also a question of intensifying the domination of poor countries throughout the earth. And so in that situation, Canada is, of course, a junior partner. Canada's hands are not clean. It's part of the alliance that Biden has formed. And this country, in its own right, is a rapacious and greedy exploiter throughout the world. Its mining companies and what else are up to their necks in the process of exploitation and all the violence and oppression that goes with it. And so I think what we have to try to build in the face of that is an alliance, a global alliance to fight back. And we here in Canada have to play an enormous role in that. If I just took the example of Palestine and the incredible resistance that emerged right right there, and the changes that are taking place in the way people think. This is an incredible opportunity for us to reach out and put our hands on that economic and military lifeline that sustains the oppression of the Palestinian people and tug on it. It's not a matter of sentiments, it's a matter of practical and necessary action. And above all else, what I think we must do is we must infuse our struggles here in this country with a profound and practical sense of international solidarity in very, very concrete ways. We demand, for example, social housing be built. We demand the obscene commodification of housing in our urban spaces be ended and that people's needs be met. It's very easy when you do that to understand that as long as they're building warplanes to drop bombs on people, as long as they're sending warships to engage in provocations, then those resources are being squandered. And we can mobilize people and we can infuse in them that sense. We can say, we don't want them to send torture. We don't want them to send killing machines to the Saudi torture state. We want clean water for people who live on indigenous reserves. All of those things are very valid and very, very important. And that's the kind of future that I think we need to fight for. That's the kind of way forward that we need to fight for in very, very concrete, very, very practical ways. And what's created here is a loud voice. And that loud voice tonight has to become a call to action. And it has to become a basis for organizing all across the country on that basis. Because really, when I look at what came out of the G7 meeting in Cornwall, it's quite clear that these people are making their plans. They're making their plans to try to resolve this crisis on their terms. And that's going to be very brutal. It's going to be very destructive. It's going to be very bloody. And we here have a responsibility to challenge that. We have a responsibility to challenge that within this country, and we have a responsibility to participate in the building of a global movement. And a very major part of that is to restrain the hand of this G7 partner in terms of the role it plays on the global stage. So the meeting tonight, I think, takes place in a context where the significance of what we are doing around foreign policy has increased so dramatically in terms of its importance, in terms of its vital nature. This is a vital meeting, and I'm so glad to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John Clarke, for that rousing yet sobering call to action. Not sentiment, but concrete action. That is an excellent takeaway. So we're going to pause for another social media moment. Lots more groups sent in their videos. Please check them out. Tamara, so excellent. She's posting all the things, all the links. We have videos that have been sent in from Kingston Peace Council, Fire This Time, Ottawa Peace Council, Harbinger Media Network, the Canada-China Council for Cooperation and Development Youth Association, Peace Alliance Winnipeg, Socialist Action, Frente Hugo Chavez para la Defensa de los Pueblos Vancouver, and the International League of People's Struggles Canada. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your work with us. These will also find a home alongside today's presentations, which we're all going to be putting up on our soon to be revamped resource page, because we want people to know about your work. So again, I'm just going to ask for folks to keep your presentations to 2 minutes and under. Up next, we have the formidable Canadian Peace Congress represented by Miguel Figueroa. Welcome, Miguel.
Well, thanks very much, Bianca, and a big thank you to the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute for convening this vital discussion tonight. More and more Canadians are fed up with Canada's involvement in a string of military actions and foreign wars, from Yugoslavia to Libya to Afghanistan and beyond. They've had enough of Canadian collusion with imperialist-sponsored and organized regime change campaigns and conspiracies from Haiti and Honduras and to Venezuela and Nicaragua, Bolivia, of course, and elsewhere. And they're completely fed up with ever-growing arms budgets, which continue to escalate at the expense of the vital needs of the Canadian people. And I think this meeting is testimony to the incredible work that's taking place on so many fronts around these issues around peace, around international solidarity, around social justice and climate justice around the world. But knowing what we're against and agreeing about what we're against is only part of the solution, as I'm sure everybody appreciates. We also need more clarity and unity around what we're fighting for, the kind of just foreign policy and a new direction for Canada that we aspire to win the support of Canadian people for. And in our view, that means a truly independent foreign policy based on peace and disarmament, based on respect for the UN Charter and international law, and not on militarization, aggression, and war. And to those ends, Canadian Peace Congress recently issued a peace alternative for Canada, which we invite people to go and check out on our website at canadianpeacecongress.ca. I put a link to it in the chat section. It's a modest contribution, but we invite people to check it out, give us your opinions about it, and hopefully it can make a contribution to building that kind of unity around what we need. But of course, even that is not sufficient, as others have spoken to. We also need action, and it's really exciting to see the kinds of campaigns and initiatives that are being taken in solidarity with the Palestinian people, and so many other struggles for social justice, for climate justice, and for peace and disarmament that are taking place in Canada. From the point of view of the Peace Congress, we've been concentrating our work on opposing the new Cold War against the People's Republic of China and against the Russian Federation. These are not just propaganda exercises. This could bring the world once again to the brink of nuclear war and are very serious. We're also focusing on the struggle against NATO and NORAD and to get Canada out of these aggressive imperialist military alliances. And of course, in solidarity with socialist Cuba, with the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, with Nicaragua and other people's forces, not only in this continent and this hemisphere, but around the world. So we're all about action, and we're all willing to join with other organizations to build this movement. And as others have said, this is precisely the time. There has never been a time more urgent and when such initiatives have been more necessary. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Miguel. The Canadian Peace Congress has been doing this work for so long, and we really, the historic impact is felt across the country with the work that we're doing. Next up, we have Brent Patterson, who's representing Peace Brigades International, Canada. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you, Bianca. And thank you to the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute for convening this evening. And it's been really great to hear all of the speakers. Thank you so much. And for those to come as well. I'm speaking from unceded Algonquin territory in the city of Ottawa. In terms of Peace Brigades International, the practical, concrete international solidarity that we provide is primarily through physical accompaniment. We accompany social leaders, Indigenous land defenders, human rights defenders, activists primarily in Colombia, Honduras, Mexico, and Guatemala, where they are at great risk of death and harassment and criminalization and judicialization because of their activism and work. What we also do is political accompaniment, what we call advocacy. And it's really kind of where Canadian foreign policy and Canadian corporate violence intersects in Latin America. And so we try to highlight a range of issues in different ways, and maybe just sort of concretely to highlight a few of those issues. I know, probably most people on this webinar will be very familiar with the export of the light armored vehicles to Saudi Arabia. Those same LAVs have also been exported to Colombia, as well as other armored vehicles manufactured in the Toronto area to the Colombia National Police. And I'm sure many of you may have seen either in the news or social media the repression against the social protests, the national strike that's been happening in Colombia. And so again, we're trying to highlight in terms of Canadian arms exports to Colombia and Latin America. We've also been highlighting the crucial role of environmental defenders, land and rights defenders in terms of addressing climate change. On average, 4 land and environmental defenders have been killed every week since the Paris Agreement was signed in December 2015, and we need collectively to better address that issue. Lots more to say, but maybe also just say as well too, just as we as we see across this country the unmarked graves being found at residential schools in this country. Tomorrow, my colleagues with Peace Brigades International in Guatemala will be accompanying 21 Indigenous land defenders who were arrested at a protest outside of a military base that has been funded and supported by the Canadian government in past years. Those Indigenous people were dispossessed from their land for the building of that base. That base was also where mass graves of Indigenous peoples were found who had been killed by the military. So we'll be accompanying them as they're in court. So lots more to say, but I'll leave it at that. And thank you so much for this evening. And it's been really great to learn about everyone's work. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. And thank you for your brave defense of human rights. Up next, we have Dolores Chu, who is representing the Women of Diverse Origins. Welcome, Dolores.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bianca and CFPI, for this amazing initiative. And congratulations on your anniversary of the founding of your institute, taking the public space and bringing us together, presenting timely and informed events that are so strong and critical and provide us with a lot of sustenance in our work. This evening, I'm speaking to you from the unceded territory of the Ghanaian Gahaga from Jojaga, Montreal. Women of Diverse Origins, or Femmes de Diverses Origins, has been around for 20 years now, while the impetus for our formation was to reinstate the militant tradition of International Women's Day in Montreal and make it a true celebration of international feminist solidarity. The founding members were already implicated in grassroots community activism in Montreal, many of us being first-generation migrants who had been working on issues of solidarity and political support for grassroots political movements for peace, justice, equality, and democracy in our countries of origin. As well, we were engaged in local struggles of migrants and refugees in Montreal for justice and equality. In Women of Diverse Origins, we work in tandem and respect with Indigenous women and their communities here and elsewhere. Our work and positions are informed by our awareness of how patriarchy and capitalism work in tandem and morph to always prop up those who are already privileged and subordinate the racialized and marginalized. As a result of who we are, our origins, and our engagement every year when we have organized around Women's Day, the vibrant Montreal International Women's Day demo, for those of you who are from Montreal, you'll know about this, and a solidarity event with speakers, performances, and workshops when we bring together the grassroots, local and global. Because of our origins and membership, we are very concerned with colonialism, neocolonialism, and imperialism. And in our actions, we identify Canada's very problematic role and position in these systems and policies. Our origins coincided with 9/11 and the reactionary responses of Canada to quote unquote terror that had a direct impact on our communities here and abroad, We became implicated in the anti-war movements here, and we were also implicated in drawing attention to how 9/11 was utilized by governments in many parts of the world to unleash increased repression, as with the Gujarat genocide of Muslims of 2002, when Canada continued a business as usual relationship with India. We have been active in exposing the role and presence of Canadian multinationals that work in tandem with oppressive policies of local governments and mafia-type organizations, for example, with extractivism in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And we bring the voices and struggles of women and communities directly impacted from these places, as, for example, women from Ecuador or Congo or the Philippines. We have not shied away from calling Canada to account and always making links between settler colonialism here and elsewhere, for example, in Palestine, or the hypocrisy, Canada's hypocrisy with regard to the Kurds. We identify Canada's immigration and refugee policies as being informed by neoliberal capitalism here and overseas, and we have been part of the struggle to end temporary precarious work. As we say, good enough to work, good enough to stay. In Women of Diverse Origins, while we may be critical of policies of countries abroad, our position is that this can never be an excuse for Canadian colonialist and imperialist intervention and Canadian disruption of genuine people's movements for democracy. And we always privilege the voices and perspectives of women wherever we are. Thank you so much for letting us share our experiences.
Thank you, Dolores. I deeply appreciate your clarity and the struggle of women of diverse origins against Canada's settler colonial policies at here and abroad. I've been very inspired by your work. Next up, we have Graham Russell from Rights Action. Welcome, Graham.
Hi, Bianca, and hello, everyone. I echo earlier thanks to the CFPI for this great initiative, and I look forward to seeing where it goes and helping promote it and spread it. And I've really appreciated hearing the presentations in different voices, and I think our work fits in nicely with the work of many groups here. I was particularly struck by John Clarke's, the breadth of his analysis and the urgency of it, and I appreciate that very much. What is our little piece of this? Rights Action does two main things. We directly fund and support justice struggles and community defense struggles, mainly in Guatemala and Honduras. And we carry out education and activism in Canada. The justice struggles we fund are mainly Indigenous communities seeking justice for war crimes of the past, digging up mass graves, etc., and for ongoing human rights violations, many of them related to actors in the international economic order. And then the community defense struggles that we fund and support are mainly land, human rights, and environmental defense struggles of mainly Indigenous people, but also non-Indigenous campesinos, who are mainly suffering harms and violations and evictions due to one sector of the global economy or another. It could be the for export food production sectors, it could be mining and dams, it could be tourism and maquiladora sweatshops. We're, as best we can, we're supporting many struggles in both countries. And that's what they're up against. So when we get to our work of education and activism in Canada and the US, we work in the US as well, chipping away there. We base all of our education and activism on the notion that these are our problems. We are not a group that's in Honduras and Guatemala helping them with their problems. We are directly funding them to the best of our ability and providing human rights support, et cetera. But then when we educate and get involved in activism, that these are our problems and we need to learn more about it and then bring about full accountability here at home. So in cases of Honduras and Guatemala, Canada has very clear economic interests in the sectors of mine sectors and maquiladora sweatshops like Gildan that was already mentioned. In the sectors of tourism, like tourism operators are forcibly evicting Indigenous Griffin people off their lands in northern Honduras right now. So we're supporting these community defense struggles, but we do our education and activism in Canada on trying to bring about accountability, political and legal accountability in Canada. Canadian government policies in the region support our economic interests. Canada openly supported the 2009 military coup in Honduras. Canada forces free trade agreements upon these countries to favor our corporate interests. And Canada maintains full political relations with these corrupt military-backed regimes in both countries, and we call them democratic allies for political purposes. So the fundamental challenges that we've been confronting, like many groups here over the past decades, are to really redefine, in Canada, to redefine Canadian foreign policy issues and our corporate operations in other countries as Canadian issues. No more, no less Canadian issues than municipal, provincial, and federal affairs across the country. They're Canadian issues. These are not, that's not Guatemalan corruption over there, though it is in part. That's not Honduran impunity over there, though it is in part. That's Canadian corruption. That is Canadian impunity. That is Canadian human rights violations. And then based on through the education, we're changing the definition of what is our role there to continue to address and challenge the role of the media, the mainstream media, in how it reports on and addresses and frames these issues. The challenges of addressing and challenging the role of our courts and our political oversight bodies that fundamentally enable immunity from accountability. There are some exceptions to this in Canada, but our political and legal systems in Canada provide our government and our companies and businesses and investors with fundamental immunity from any liability in Canada for the harms caused in other countries around the world. And then all of this fits in with what's been said many times in this discussion. All of this is part of a really much bigger debate. What kind of world do we want to live in? And sorry about that. And what is the real nature of the very unjust, unequal, and quite violent global nation state system and the global economic order of which we're beneficiaries? And what do we want to do about it? Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Graham. It's great to hear the description of your work, both on the ground and also just bringing that accountability home and helping us to understand our role. Our next speaker is longtime activist Sakura Saunders, and she's representing both Protest Barrack and the Mining and Justice Solidarity Network. Welcome, Sakura.
Thank you so much, Bianca, for organizing. And I'm just so excited about the existence of the CFPI on your year anniversary. I think the work you all do is critical. And I'm so happy that we can all come together to discuss international solidarity and building this movement together and hearing everyone's presentations. I can tell you, I'm just so excited to work with everyone in the future. And of course, there's so many groups here represented that I and we as Protest Barrack and Mining and Justice Solidarity Network already work with. So again, my name is Sakura Saunders. I'm the co-founder of Protest Barrack and later a co-founder of the Mining and Justice Solidarity Network. Because working with Protest Barrack, I engaged with so many people that had connections with mining impacted communities, and we had to broaden the focus to, all, relationship building and solidarity work with all mining impacted communities of specifically Canadian mining companies. And so both groups are all volunteer grassroots organizations that work in solidarity with mining impacted communities. We do this by relationship building with members of these communities, by being a platform for these communities in Toronto, where much of the industry is based. We have a mining impacted solidarity fund, a community solidarity fund, which we can provide immediate support to groups in need to help in their struggle for mining justice. And so this can be for buses, for a consulta, or funeral costs, unfortunately. A lot of times that kind of thing happens, or just, immediate needs. So I just wanted to share, rather than tell you everything that we do or the companies that we work with, I just wanted to show everybody an example of our work. And it's also, I put it in the chat. So it's an example of our work, and it's also an example of the corporate capture of the Canadian government by these mining industries. And so the article, it's kind of old at this point, but it was the article is about our intervention at the only foreign policy debate to happen in recent years during a Canadian election, which was of course hosted by the Munk debates. Now, Peter Munk is the chairman, or was a former chairman and founder of Barrick Gold. And so, of course, we had a feeling that despite the fact that Canada leads the world in mining companies, and Canada doesn't lead the world in much, right? But an overwhelming majority of the mining companies are headquartered in Canada. But we had a feeling that not a single question would be asked about the Canadian mining industry. And it turned out that we were right. But luckily, because we had this forethought, we brought our 15-foot Peter Monk puppet, complete with a Pinocchio nose and blood on his hands. And he held a sign that read, "Everything's fine. No need to discuss mining injustice." And we passed out hundreds of flyers to everybody that was waiting in line to get into this debate. And of course, the wait was long because there's all sorts of other activism going on to delay people getting in, not to mention the heightened security that they had in place. So in part so that they could kick out members of Mining and Justice Solidarity Network from getting into that debate. And so, we think it's really important to do this work because, of course, really highlighting the elephant in the room by making it the elephant right outside the debate. We hope that it made people question why is this not being discussed? It's just so obvious, and hint that the Canadian government is actually very much controlled by mining interests. And so I think I might have gone over my time. I just want to say that, Graham and Jamie already mentioned how mining interests influence international aid, dictate the activities of our foreign diplomats, determine which coups we support, and prescribe the conditions of our multilateral investments and free trade agreements. And so this discussion of mining is so important at the international solidarity level, and also it relates to so much the colonial injustice that's happening within the territories that comprise this country. And so thank you so much for having this event, and I just look forward to working with everyone in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Sakura. Your enthusiasm is totally infectious, and it's really uplifting to hear about MISN and Protest Barrick, and in particular, the spectacular Pinocchio intervention. Art and activism, yes. So, we've been totally in awe of the work of these groups for many years and its impact. So thank you very much for taking the time to be here. I do want to take a short moment to welcome a few more people to our gathering that are here: Alba Social Movements Canada, the Anti-Imperialist Alliance, the Barnard Becker Center Foundation, Canadian Palestinian Social Association, as well as Artistes pour la Paix. I also just want to ask about the view. Are people able to see okay? Are we in gallery view or are we in speaker view? Is everything fine? You can just mention in the comments if you're having any trouble seeing, because I've seen a few people mention that. So just let me know. And before we hear from our other speakers and organizers, we're going to hear a brief word from David Heap, who was a part of the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute and also was one of the core members of the #NoUNSC for Canada campaign. He's going to say a few words, and then we'll hear from some more folks. All right, welcome, David.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Quick audience participation question. How many people had heard of the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute a year and a half ago? Easy answer. None of you, because it didn't exist yet. Okay. In the fall of 2019, I was at a flotilla meeting doing a bit of a planning session, and our Norwegian friend said, we should campaign against Norway running for the UN Security Council. And we paused and said, you might not like your government, but you know what? I think ours is worse. So we checked who was running, and we all agreed that Ireland is probably the least worst of the bunch. It was too late to try to get Malta or Greenland to run. So of the available candidates, the Norwegians came back and said, you're right, Canada is worse. I think the votes since last year have made it pretty clear that that was the right call, that none of us like our governments, but there's one of those three, which is definitely the one not to run. So I wrote in Rabble thing. I thought at the hashtag the time was going to be ABC for UNSC, anybody but Canada for the UN Security Council. And then we got together with Bianca and Eve and Karen and Arnold and Tamara, and we brainstormed, and it was literally done with, like they say, half a dozen people. You can look at Eve's story on Rabble now about how activists took on the government. It was a great pleasure to work with them. sitting here in my garden. This was last year in the first lockdown. I made videos and then trolled the social media accounts in French and English and Spanish of the Canadian foreign missions who were on full propaganda mode everywhere around the world, and just said, hey, folks, you might want to know another side of the story that these people are pushing you. So in full lockdown, we were able to troll them, and as Eve points out, get these panic messages going from the Canadian UN mission saying, oh, don't listen to the activists, don't listen to the activists. So this is a clear example of grassroots citizen activism troubling the giant, troubling the state's plans. And then we were able to sit here 1 year ago today and celebrate. I cracked open a cold Taipei beer from Palestine to say, we actually did it. We inched them out. It was an amazing victory. This is the thing. It was done on less than a shoestring. It was done on half a shoestring, not even half a shoestring. Basically, the energy of a bunch of people who got some other people, you know, it helps when you can go from Maureen Maguire to Nobel laureate Maureen Maguire to Roger Waters, but also to Romeo Saganash and Ellen Gabriel and Pam Palmatier, and say a lot of people are on side with this petition against Canada at the UNSC. But it was done with no resources. Since then, we went to Canada needs a full review of its foreign policy. A bunch more people got on side, and you've all heard of this organization in a year, okay? They need more than a shoestring. We need more than a shoestring. There's a link here on how to donate. Oh, sorry, that was my direct message. Somebody will put the right one in the right, sorry, all panelists and attendees, here we go. I know I'm gonna become a sustainer. I want you all to be sustainers. If you can't personally, I get that. Your organization can, or some association, union, or somebody can. Join the network. The most important thing, as a lot of people have said, is to stay in touch and work together. But this little organization that could needs your help, all of our help, to be able to do more in the next year and a half and what far beyond. So support the CFPI and support all of our work together by bringing the voices out and putting foreign policy on the public debate in Canada in all of its ugly facets that we've been hearing about. Canadians need to talk about colonialism at home and abroad. And this is how we do it. Thank you. Fund the CFPI.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. We appreciate that. We appreciate you. And it has been a truly terrific year, and it is amazing to consider what can be achieved when there's a single-mindedness, but more importantly, when we come together, which is the point of our gathering today. So I would like to now call upon Saide Kadir from the Iranian Canadian Congress. Welcome, Saide.
Thank you, Bianca. I thank you and all members of CFPI for their wonderful work and to bring us towards a more just Canadian policy in relation to our world. So my name is Saidi. I'm Kadir. I'm the Vice President of Iranian Canadian Congress. I'm talking from the unceded Mohawk territories of Canyon, Kehaka in Montreal. So ICC, just to precise, is really a community organization that our members want to be the most unpolitical as possible because we gather community interests. Counting on the voluntary work of the board and its volunteers, receiving no budgets from any government. ICC talks on behalf of not all Iranians, but its members only. I needed to specify this because one of ICC mandates is to fight against discrimination, and even in that clear-cut elementary mandate that we've been trying to deliver, our voice is highly attacked by right-wing organizations, including with judicial instances like slaps in order to silence our voice. So I'm going to mention two problems on which ICC has focused despite limited resources and opposition from powerful forces concerning justice in Canadian foreign policy. First is the closing of the Iranian embassy by Harper in 2012. So since then, 400,000 Iranian Canadians and their families in Iran have experienced much useless difficulties in, we can say, everyday life for basic consular services when they die, when they marry, when they give birth, or any other problems. And ironically, they have to address a small interest bureau in the basement of another embassy in Washington to have incomplete some services over there. Interestingly, the only other countries that have no embassies are Israel and Saudi Arabia. But even the US, who has, strong opposition and enmity with Iran, has a service. So ICC gathered 16,000 signatures a few years ago to ask the Canadian government to reopen the embassy. And the Liberals came in power promising to deliver this, to open the embassy. And this petition was brought by a member of parliament from Iranian origin in the, to ask for a reopening. But they never developed that because of strong opposition from diverse forces who oppose opening of a embassy. So despite the pretensions of Canada of being pro-diplomacy and peace, this basic human right of the 19th century of having embassies and talking is not being done for the Iranians. And the other situation that ICC works on is to condemn any kind of sanctions from Canada towards Iran. Canada has some forms of, unfortunately, laws that brings any kind of exchange difficult between the two countries. But they mainly do sanctions secondarily from the US. So we think that sanctions only pressure the lives and make Iranians deprived of basic rights, of basic needs, including medication and the ability to buy vaccines in a pandemic, because the sanctions have been increased during this pandemic. And we are also against any form of sanctions in general in other countries. That's about it. That's what we do. And thank you very much for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Saide. It's really, really important to have diaspora community voice and representation, especially amid such major geopolitical conflict. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here today. Next, we're going to hear from Anton Wagner, who's with the Hiroshima Nagasaki Day Coalition. Welcome, Anton.
Thank you, Bianca. The Hiroshima Nagasaki Day Coalition in Toronto challenges the federal government's policies on nuclear weapons by organizing the annual August remembrance of the horrific atomic bombings of the two Japanese cities. Over 200,000 people perished, most of them civilians. Last year, we publicized the appeal to Prime Minister Trudeau by the Hiroshima survivor and abolition activist Setsuko Thurlow. Her appeal called on the federal government to acknowledge Canada's critical role in the creation of atom bombs in the 1940s, to express a statement of regret for the deaths and suffering they caused in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and to ratify the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This year, we organized the Cross-Canada Appeal to Parliament to hold public hearings on the existential dangers of nuclear arms. It was published twice in the Ottawa Hill Times in January. We also commissioned the public opinion survey by Nanos Research that again showed wide cross-Canada support for the abolition of nuclear weapons and for Canada to ratify the UN ban treaty. The discovery of nuclear fission was only made possible by Canadian uranium mined in the Northwest Territories. Nearly all the uranium used for the atom bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was refined in Port Hope, Ontario. Canadian uranium enabled the buildup of thousands of American and British nuclear weapons after World War II. The nuclear reactor developed by the National Research Council Laboratory in Montreal and at Chalk River in 1945, subsequently given to India as a gift from Canada, produced the plutonium that led to the Indian atom bomb in 1974. Things are changing, as Avi said. If we could get Canadians to acknowledge the truth of this past nuclear history, the Canadian government would be pressured to be at the forefront of the global movement to eliminate the very nuclear weapons Canada helped to create. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anton. It's also been such a pleasure working with you to try and pressure the Trudeau government in recent months to sign the UN treaty ban. Yeah, everyone find out about the excellent work of HNDC. You can find them online. The link should be in the chat. Next up, we have Common Frontiers. Jorge Garcia Ogales is representing them. Welcome, Jorge.
Thank you, Bianca. Pleasure to be here. First, I want to thank everybody for the presentations. You see, many days we are alone in our homes, seeing what's happening, seeing how little or how wrong the Canadian government is doing, and we feel lonely. We feel that we don't have enough time to do all what we have to do. But in evenings like this, when you hear all the other people working on different issues that you're interested on, but you don't have time to, you feel stronger. You feel that you are not alone. You feel that this huge elephant that we have in front of us, all together, we will get it dominated. And then I want to start by thanking everybody, all the presenters, all the ones that are coming, all the ones that have been mentioned, because personally, today, you made me feel stronger. I want to talk briefly about Common Frontiers. Common Frontiers is more than 30 years old. It's a national organization of faith groups, labor and social organizations. We started challenging foreign policy in the Canadian, to the Canadian government in the fight against the free trade agreement of North America, free trade agreement. That's the name, the Common Frontiers, the three countries working together for a different economic reality, not the neoliberal reality that the free trade agreement was imposing to us. Then we started our fight more than 30 years ago against the free trade agreement, the North America free trade agreement. We continue against the free trade agreement of the America. And in that process, we created this organization that worked mainly on the American fronts. We work on different countries. We do education, we do lobby, we do education. We believe in dialogue and debates among allies to understand common issues, common meanings of issues like imperialism, patriarchy, colonialism, racism, and how do we work together to confront those issues. We were part of all the World Social Forum, and we organized the first Canadian forum that it was called the People's Social Forum. Today, we are working on sanctions on Venezuela to remove it. We are working very hard for peace in Colombia for many, many years. And in this past week, a lot more. We have been participating and monitoring elections in Venezuela, in Honduras. We are working also in Venezuela. And we have launched a podcast called Super Exploitation and Resistance. And the plan, the idea, we already have 4 chapters out, is to bring the voice in the of the South to an audience of the North. Then again, it's a national organization. We believe in international solidarity. We believe in protecting the environment. We believe in democratic freedoms. We are very proud of being part of this large coalition of groups working for international solidarity. Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you so much. And thanks to Common Frontiers for your major coordination role with unions and other social groups. And I share the sentiment that you expressed here. I also feel stronger just being in this space with people who are doing so much incredible work to challenge the harm that is being caused by our foreign policies. And so next up, we have Stop Ecocide Canada. They're a new organization in Canada, and they're going to be represented by Lisa Oldring. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Bianca, and thanks to all the organizers. This is quite the marathon, but I can feel the great energy that is in this room. My name is Lisa Oldring. I'm the Law and Policy Advisor with Stop Ecocide Canada, and I'm speaking to you from Treaty 7, the traditional lands of the Stoney Nakoda, Blackfoot, and Tsuut'ina Nations. I think, as Avi said from the outset, it's pretty clear that we're living in a unique moment in the history of humanity. The mass damage and destruction of ecosystems, committed for decades with impunity, has contributed to the current climate crisis, the collapse of biodiversity, and really threats to the very life support systems of the Earth. And of course, this crisis poses risks to us all, but the most marginalized and disempowered populations are those that face the harshest impacts. In spite of the severe harm they cause to the planet and its inhabitants, however, acts that amount to ecocide have not been sanctioned as criminal. And this is a pretty glaring accountability gap. So the Stop Ecocide campaign, which we are part of as Stop Ecocide Canada, is a global movement with just one pragmatic objective, and that is to establish a law of ecocide, which would recognize large-scale and systematic destruction of nature as an international crime. And this could be done by adding a fifth crime to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. So that crime would sit alongside genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the newest crime of aggression. Doing so would signal a moral and legal red line in terms of serious damage to the environment, and it would establish individual criminal responsibility, ultimately deterring actions that could lead to the destruction of ecosystems, and hold corporate actors and decision makers to account. Canada played a pivotal role in the establishment of the International Criminal Court back in the 1990s and was among the very first to ratify the Rome Statute. As part of the coherent feminist foreign policy, I think, and in line with its climate commitments and the human rights of present and future generations, Canada is well placed to join the growing number of states that support criminalizing ecocide. Stop Ecocide Canada would like to invite all Canadian organizations, all of you, corporations, NGOs, and others to join us in asking the Canadian government to declare its full support for an international crime of ecocide. And you can sign on to an open letter, which is on our website. You can also become an Earth Protector and endorse the international petition. And thanks so much to the organizers for helping us to share the web information. I really look forward to staying connected with this really wonderful group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Please share any links that you would like in the chat if you have a moment. And it's so nice to have this new organization on the scene. We need you in our movement. So we only have a few more speakers to go. I do want to shout out a couple of organizations before we get to our final speakers. The Canadian Muslim Peace Alliance, thank you for being with us. IJV Winnipeg, Design with Dialogue, Global Peace Alliance BC, Society, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. The next speaker is Martine Eloy from Échec à la Guerre. Welcome, Martine.
Hello. Thank you very much to the CFPI for inviting us. I'm really delighted to be here tonight and to be able to connect with so many organizations outside of Quebec. I'm now speaking from the unceded territory of Kanankeaka in Montreal. The Collectif Échec à la Guerre first came together in the fall of 2002 as a large coalition of grassroots groups and union organizations in Quebec, greatly concerned by the imminence of war against Iraq. This coalition pressured the Canadian government not to participate in the war and urged other countries to resist US blackmail. Since then, the Collectif Échec à la Guerre has worked steadfastly to expose how US foreign policy is designed to assert US military domination on the world, and especially to denounce the complicity and participation of Canada in all US-led wars in the past 30 years. We've published a series of booklets on issues such as NATO, Canada's foreign policy, the so-called responsibility to protect, as well as in-depth booklet available in English on the rise of militarism in Canadian society. Moreover, for the past 10 years, we've been organizing the White Poppy campaign in Quebec to attract attention to the fact that wars, the majority of victims of wars are civilians, and to denounce Canada's roles in these various wars. Today, the decision of the US, Great Britain, Russia, China, and the other nuclear states to modernize their entire nuclear arsenals poses a serious threat for the survival of humanity, especially in the context of this new Cold War, and it requires our immediate attention. Canada has yet refused to sign on to the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, despite the fact that the recent poll revealed that 74% of Canadians support or somewhat support Canada signing and ratifying this treaty. Nor must we forget that Canada bears a large responsibility for the genesis and persistence of the nuclear peril. Along with the United States and the United Kingdom, it was one of 3 countries involved in the development of the first atomic bombs, as Anton Martiner pointed out, supplying nearly all the refined uranium needed for the Manhattan Project. Then from 1945 to 65, Canada fueled a nuclear arms race by selling enough uranium to the United States and the United Kingdom to make as much as 15,000 nuclear bombs. We have just published a booklet on the danger posed by the very existence of nuclear weapons, the role of Canada in their production, and the importance of mobilizing for their elimination. It will be available shortly in English. We hope to be able to link up and with climate activists to mobilize against these 2 life-threatening issues. We stand in solidarity against war and for a nuclear-free world. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martine. And for anyone living in Quebec, we know that you are a real force of nature at Échec à la Guerre. Thank you so much for your great work. Our next speaker is David Webster, and he's representing the East Timor Action Network. Welcome, Webster. Welcome, David, rather.
That's fine. Thanks, Bianca. Good evening from Abenaki territory, also in what's now Quebec. And I guess I should start off by just passing on regrets from Dominique Marchal from Canadian Network for Humanitarian History, who is scheduled to be on a little bit later. If there's activist groups that are interested in documenting their history and preserving their archives, and then the Canadian Network on Humanitarian History, which is aidhistory.ca, is very happy to help with that. But as Bianca said, my job here is to say a few words about ETAN, the East Timor Action Network. For those who don't know, East Timor is a small country in Southeast Asia that's invaded and occupied by the neighboring great power, Indonesia, in 1975. If anyone's seen the film about Noam Chomsky called Manufacturing Consent, then you'll know that the genocide in East Timor got a lot less attention than the genocide in Cambodia nearby around the same time. Canada's government aided and abetted the occupation of East Timor with economic, diplomatic, and military support for that occupation. The thing that's remarkable about this story, though, is that even though the Canadian government and all the other major governments in the world said that Timor independence was hopeless and a lost cause and a fait accompli, just like they say with Palestine today, East Timorese people continued to resist, and they finally regained their independence in 2002. So it wasn't hopeless. Having seen the government documents on this story, I know that the work done by ETAN Canada did make a difference, and it did help to change government policy. The East Timor Action Network in the United States was also fairly successful in changing American government policy. Indonesia's former foreign minister said here's a quote, "The case of Timor-Leste or East Timor showed that Indonesia should never underestimate the power of non-governmental organizations when they unite behind a particular cause." So ETAN today is campaigning on proposed Canada-Indonesia trade deal, on supporting LGBTQ+ rights in Timor-Leste, on anti-militarism in independent Timor-Leste. I'm fairly confident this is all going to work because East Timor independence proves that activism works. You don't always see it at the time, but it does work. And really, I think that's why the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute is so important, and this gathering so important. Activism gets the goods. So find David's donate link and make a donation.
Love that. I think that might be my new slogan. Activism gets the goods. So it's superb to hear. I believe it. I do believe it. Social movements are everything. It's so great to hear about your past and present work, David, and amazing to hear about the power of resistance and what can be achieved. Our next and second to last speaker of the evening is Isaac Sani, who is with the Canadian Network on Cuba. Welcome, Isaac.
Yeah. Thank you, Bianca, and thank you for the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute for organizing this exciting and very important gathering. My name is Isaac Sani, co-chair and national spokesperson of the Canadian Network on Cuba, the CNC. I'm speaking to you from Ketchepuktuk, also known as Halifax, which is on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. Founded in 2002, the CNC is the umbrella organization linking and representing more than 20 Canada-Cuba friendship and solidarity organizations ranging from Vancouver to Halifax. Currently, the CNC has raised more than $100,000 in its medical supplies for Cuba campaign and is sending nearly 2 million syringes to assist Cuba's vaccination program, especially as the United States economic war against Cuba has made it extremely difficult for the island nation to obtain medical equipment. Cuba continues to receive international accolades for its singular role in the global fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, illustrated by the numerous nomination of Cuba's international medical contingent, the Henry Reeve Brigade, for the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. Almost 4,000 Cuban medical personnel in at least 39 countries and territories have participated and are participating in the front lines of the fight against the coronavirus in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Indeed, Cuba has established an unparalleled legacy of internationalism, actively supporting and engaging in the anti-colonial and national liberation struggles of many countries in the global south, particularly in Africa, and in the struggle against racist rule in Southern Africa, and also in assisting the social development and nation building and emancipation aspirations of countries across the global south. The CNC seeks to ensure that Canadian foreign policy towards Cuba is based on equality, respect for sovereignty, independence, and the right of self-determination. The CNC has therefore initiated a parliamentary petition to the government of Canada against U.S. economic blockade of Cuba and on Canada-Cuba relations, and several people have posted the link to that petition. At present, more than 1,400 supporters have signed the petition. Our goal is to gather as many signatures as possible to demonstrate the level of support and affinity that Canadians have for Cuba. This will hopefully act as a brake on any intention by Ottawa to alter its policy to Cuba in a way that mirrors that of Washington. On June 23rd, the United Nations General Assembly will vote on the annual resolution calling for the end of the United States economic blockade against Cuba, a virtual economic war against the heroic island nation. For 28 consecutive years, the international community has overwhelmingly voted in favor of ending this criminal and unjust US policy towards Cuba. We invite you to unite your voice with people around the world at a 24-hour global picket featuring speakers, cultural performances, and more. And that link has also been posted in the chat. In closing, I wish to note that millions of Canadians have traveled to Cuba and come away with a profound respect and admiration for the people of Cuba. Irrespective of their political or ideological positions, Canadians stand for the building of genuine friendship with the heroic island nation, relations based on mutual respect, equality, and recognition of Cuba's right to self-determination and sovereignty. Consequently, Canada's relations with Cuba and any other country should and must be based on mutual respect and equality, not on outmoded colonialist and imperial ideas and practices. Long live international solidarity. Long live the international struggle for